Hello, everyone. This is Stephen Mcnallen with another episode of God's Folk and Destiny. Whose gods? Our gods, the holy deities of the Northlands, led by Odin and by Frigga. Whose folk? Our folk, with roots in Hyperborea and branches all around Midgard. Whose destiny? Our destiny. That destiny we will win for ourselves with might and main and great deeds. Honor, self-reliance, the existence of our people forever. So it be. Well, listeners, you wanted me to find a woman to interview. And hey, I happen to know one. In fact, I've known her for a long time. This is my wife, Sheila, for those handful of you who don't know. And she's the ideal person to bring on board on this because she was with the Asatru Folk Assembly literally from the beginning. And in fact, she may have helped name it. We'll have to have a discussion about that. And tonight we're going to talk about women's role in Asatru, women's roles, but more generally about Asatru today, what it has for men and women together. And just a lot of bits and pieces about the history of Asatru in America that not many people know. Frankly, this lady here is probably the most qualified living person in the world to tell this story. But first, if you like this programming, you know what you need to do. You need to go in, subscribe to Rothenfolk. Like this video, comment on this video, and share. It's the same old formula that everybody gives you, but that's what works. We need to get our message out to more people because our message is important. Thank you. Well,
so here we are.
So why don't we just begin with you just kind of relating how you got involved in this thing of ours, and kind of what some of your contributions were and how the progression that you have seen. That's pretty wide open, but just jump right in and tell folks things they haven't heard yet.
A lot of you have heard the story of my beginning in Asatru, but probably most of you haven't. And mine really goes back to having an acquaintance, a fellow I worked with, who 1 week we went off to take a group of 7th graders over to Point Reyes National Seashore over on the coast of California. And around the campfire, as people are singing songs and doing whatever we do, roasting marshmallows, this man, Steve Mcnallen, strode in wearing his helmet and his cape, his cloak, his blue cloak, and he began regaling us all with one of the myths, the one about Thor going back to get his hammer and having to dress as Freya to do it. And he mesmerized everybody there. And, you know, he was enchanting. He was wonderful. He was a wonderful showman. And I had my own contributions. I was singing and telling stories. And it was just a very, very upbeat weekend. And he came back and he started telling me about Asatru. And it was very much a Viking thing. I mean, that's the way it came across to me. This fellow was wearing Viking garb when he was doing these various stories. And I didn't see myself as a person connected with Vikings. It just wasn't there. I knew exactly what my ancestry was mostly Irish, some English, and German on my grandfather's side. And where was the Viking? And so I kind of attempted to kind of get involved and help Steve with very small events that came on after that. And I eventually began working with him on the Runestone Journal, which we put into a very large format after a while. But it finally occurred to me that, you know, we've got this Icelandic thing going and the Scandinavians, and even though my children are Scandinavian through their dad, and made sense for them, where was my connection? And then it just went like that. Oh, English, Anglo-Saxon. Oh, Irish. Oh, the Vikings settled all those major towns. in Ireland. And besides that, my grandfather was Prussian. He was born in Pomerania. And, whoa, did I have connections? Yeah, everywhere. And at that point, you know, I won't say I bought in, but my ancestral connections were there. And that's what I needed, because I've always been very aware of my ancestors. So we began hosting small events, Steve and I. And we had a leadership conference once with about 10 people, and it was so exciting. We've got pictures you'll probably see on our website soon that shows Steve, you know, and doing his talking and just in this wonderful way. And it was small, but it was significant. It started us, it launched us. And from there, we began putting out the magazine, The Runestone, which he had started actually back in the 1970s and had been dropped for numerous years. And we began doing that. And then we got this idea that it was really time to go back and kind of recreate what he had been able to do back in the 1970s and 80s. And that was the Austro Free Assembly, which had been a nonprofit, highly successful for the time period when everything had to be handled through the mail. And people were all over the country, but he was located in Texas, and somehow things came together quite well for him. And I won't go into that part of the story, but he basically passed the torch off to the Austro Alliance, Bellegarde Murray, and Edward Thorson took the Room Guild, and the Troth came as part of the whole thing, the Ring of Troth. And Steve went off and went into retirement.
Well, retirement's a pretty strong word.
Well, how would you describe what you did for those years?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
We went off and did exciting things.
Well, I went off and did exciting things.
Became a teacher.
Oh, yeah, I was a teacher,
Yeah,
wasn't I?
I was a
Oh, I
teacher.
forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Oops.
That's key to the story.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
Anyway, but I do remember when we were driving on the hills above Sacramento, and we're trying to come up with a name for this new organization. And we knew we couldn't go Austro Free Assembly because it had been done. And at this point, we kept talking about our kin, talking about our folk. So I said, hey, how about the Austro Folk Assembly? And that was it. I gave it that. It was what, no V, as we were saying. Had no idea that there was a V that went with folk. To me, it was F, and always has been and always will be. But it's fine if people use the V. But I didn't know that until many years later.
I knew from day one. I just didn't bother to tell her. I mean, well, there's folk and there's folk.
Indeed.
Indeed.
So we started hosting events with people we knew, inviting them to our home, which was typical back then. That's all you could do, would be to have an event in your at your home, or maybe at a park. And we established a kindred called the Colossa Kindred, and with that became established with the Austro Alliance as one of their kindreds, because it is a kindred organization. And we kind of used that as kind of our model for a while, because they were the larger organization. We were just starting out again. And we attended several all things.
It was
great people.
It was Colossa, shortened for California Austro.
Right.
Nothing to do with Kalashnikovs.
No, that was separate.
Okay.
So, and we grew it kind of gradually. And you have to realize that at this time, of course, there was no internet. All we had was snail mail. And there was a lot of it. And there was a lot of prisoner mail that came in. And I was trying to keep up with that. It was not something we sought, but it came to us, and we did our best to try to provide information for those fellows who were incarcerated. And some of them, which is really interesting, I'm still in touch with. And I met one just last week that I remember receiving letters from.
Now, well, Sheila, how did it feel coming in as a woman into this environment that, we still had, the lingering echoes of LARPing. I hate to say it,
Oh, yeah.
but I would still dress up in tunic and so forth for ritual for a number of years before I kind of phased that out, and I thought, no, I don't really need to do that.
No,
so how did that work for you?
I think at that point I was young enough that when I attached myself to a goddess, it was probably more Freya, right? As many of us do. But in the end, it's always been Frigga, who is my model in my life. And my joy was always providing a home for our people when they would come. I mean, our home was their home. The Hof, Odenshof, is their Hof when they come to Odenshof, and we try to make everybody feel that. So I've always wanted people to feel at home. The way of the ancestors calling us home, that was one of Steve's lines that we had in a lot of our advertising. That's the way it should feel. So my role for personally was always to greet people, to make them feel welcome, to make them feel that they were in the exact right place they should be, and to take care of their children and to feed them well and all that. And that is still pretty much kind of my role. But of course, many women women were around then, they typically came with a husband or a boyfriend. And, but they found a place. Everybody found a place with us. And again, we grew kind of gradually. Yes, Steve talks about wearing tunics. That was pretty common back then, back in the 1990s when we were starting out. I typically didn't wear ritual garb, but some people chose to. We even had a warrior guild with a special tunic, as I recall. A tear rune on it, I think.
Yeah,
he was.
Yeah. Very simple gray tunic with the warrior guild emblem on it, which was a tear rune inside of a oak leaf.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a different time. A different setting. The whole thing had a different feel. One thing we were doing, though, and very proud of, is we were producing the Runestone magazine, which if you're in the AFA,
Sheila was producing it.
Well, yeah, you were writing it. I was producing it.
Well, okay.
But this is what it looked like. This happens to be a fall 1998 issue. It had great articles, Christianity and the Betrayal of European Americans, Dangers Beyond the Grave, Protecting the Dead, Let Them Eat Horses, and Scandinavian Hofs. And really cool magazines. I'm so happy with how this turned out. And they've actually taken back the name, the Runestone, for our monthly newsletter and the Also True Folk Assembly, and are calling that the Runestone again, which is nice because that is our legacy. So many things we have. Wow, Law of the Hall and Mission of the AFA and characteristics and all those things that are still intact with the Austrian Folk Assembly. So we were doing that way back in the mid-1990s when we established the Austrian Folk Assembly as a 501c3. And we had kindreds, but we were basically always a membership organization for individuals. That was our emphasis.
What sort of changes have you seen over the years, and if it does affect the presence of women, how does that work?
Wow.
That's kind of a broad one.
It is. So changes over time have been, of course, the ability to interact with people online. That just revolutionized how we could begin growing. And of course, there are pitfalls with that. We've had to learn to use etiquette. And people came to us who saw that we had potential and wanted to be part of leadership. And we had the kind of the pitfalls there of people not being, having the best interest of the AFA. But we've had some amazing women who came in at the beginning and stayed with us forever. And what I would say about our women today is that just in the last year, I'm seeing our women kind of taking off and reaching out to each other. Just this morning, a woman joined the AFA, and in no time at all, so many women were welcoming her and commenting on pictures of her baby. And it's just the way it is with us now. We're very open, loving, giving as a group, and we really feel it when we're together. We have changed some of our practices. So what was always part of the symbol was women carrying the horn around, typically 3 times. In the Austrian Alliance, it was always called the Valkyrie. What we've really done, which makes it, and that can still be done, of course, it can be something where younger women can even help with that role. But what we started doing, we figured out, was probably in the year 2010 at one of our midsummers. We had one of our elders, David James, was still with us at that point, and this was his very last attempt at doing a bloat, and he did the midsummer bloat. And he wanted the women to bless the horn for him. So the women in the group, and we have a picture of it, probably about 8 women, went off to the side, and we poured the mead into the horn, and we put our hands on the horn and put our own blessings into it. And from that one simple action that we did, it has grown into something that is being done worldwide now in our House of True community, is part of our House of True culture. And I think that's one thing I wanted to say, is that we're not afraid of adapting in the 21st century and building our culture and moving it forward. Because for one thing, we are the new expression of our ancestors in a way. Maybe they're working through us to encourage us to do these things, to kind of move on with the times and not be kind of locked into the past. And so we have something, it's very powerful, because when women bond this way prior to bloat, and put our intentions into the horn together with deep devotion, we're playing an integral part of that bloat, and it just builds from there. And the women, all the women who are involved, are all bonded at that point. So it's a very powerful thing, and I'm so glad that we do that, and it's one of our traditions.
Actually, I do think that we do get hints from the ancestors about the right way to do things from time to time. But actually, the context for the woman, the mead horn, the blessing of it, and so forth, that's very well documented. I think maybe so far as I know, the definitive book on that is called "Lady with a Mead Cup" or "Lady with a Mead Horn." I don't recall the exact.
Cup, right.
Lady with a Mead Cup,
right,
and it talks about examples from Beowulf, for example, and and the sagas and so forth. And I don't remember who wrote it. Usually I flash a book, if I've got it, but I don't know where mine is. It's wandered
I just
away.
had it. Anyway, it's Paulington.
Oh, that explains where it went. No, that wasn't Paulington, was it?
Yeah,
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty
Explains
sure.
why I can't find it,
well.
though, doesn't it?
Okay, no, I might be wrong on this one.
No.
But anyway, that was one of the things. So our women are now doing, pulling out and doing their own activities, their own discussions. At Midsummer, which we just had a week and a half ago, I organized the women's, we called it a circle of women, which is what we were eventually. And we made our hair wreaths together, and we talked about the role of the mother with Midsummer, and the role of Frigga with honoring Balder at Midsummer, and how did she feel at that point? How does she feel if there is indeed time is relative, right? And that might be currently how she was feeling. But we did that, and we ended up having a beautiful bloat where we pulled 3 women, had them step forward and bless them, particularly because they're all 3 are pregnant and have babies due, 2 of them within the month and 1 in a couple of months. And so we had these beautiful pregnant women and gave them baby blessings. And it was just amazing to do that. And immediately following that, we also got word that another woman had just taken a pregnancy test and found out it was positive. So Heather Klinkenbeard was able to share that with us just following that bloat. And it's just, there's so much vitality and life and love and fertility that is being experienced now within the AFA. I mean, kind of babies everywhere. 22 baby blankets so far being made this year in the AFA. And I'll tell you, all the time I'm hearing about new babies on the way. So families being formed with relationships with men and women, and waking up, and babies, and all the babies being brought to events, and children. And so there's a really strong presence of women, more than we've ever had, simply because we have these families that are growing, and the children are definitely part of it. I think we had 23 children in Midsummer. That was the estimate we were supposed to have. I mean, that's pretty amazing. In the old days,
basically, we're giving the Mennonites a run for their money. We're not going to I'm not going to take up farming, but I mean, really.
Yeah. So yeah, for a long time, we did not have many young families in the AFA, and I think part of it is California. You know, it's expensive to have families here. It takes two incomes typically. So there wasn't a lot of that, but that's kind of reversing now. It seems like people, again, we have a community where people work together and find jobs for each other and housing and whatever. So in California, it's working, but it's working actually throughout the country. And we're growing everywhere. And our women, I just want to say that we have amazing women in our Go There program. I am a Gideon training. That's what I get to call myself. I've been in the Go There program for almost about a year now. And but we have one lady, Katie, who actually got married a week and a half ago herself. And she is, we all take on kind of different roles that we want to assist with for our folk. And one thing she is doing is blessings of air, the goddess or the goddess air, who is our healer. And we're doing that as a monthly ritual. And Katie did it so nicely because she encouraged people to first of all send in the names of people, their acquaintances or family members who could use some support and some blessings from air. But she also produced a ritual that she put out there for everybody, and it was the step-by-step, this is how you do it, so you can take part. And we all did it at the same time. And at the same time, it was not dogmatic. It was not like you have to do it this way. You can adapt it, you can do it slightly different, but let's all have our intentions done at the same time with the same group of people so that we can bring healing to them. And it was huge. I mean, there were so many women who took part in that, and in their own homes, set up their altars and did their own rituals for our folk, for the greater folk, because some are not even, of course, AFA members, they might be family members. But the point is, the love and intentions went out where they needed to go. And that is some of the difference with women taking on, excuse me, a bigger role. Crack my water.
So what is your favorite ritual and why?
See if I can clear my throat. Here we go.
You need a mug like this to drink out of.
What's in it? Water.
Water.
Okay. So I would have to say for myself, winter nights. Winter nights is my time of the year. I love fall. As I've gotten older, I appreciate it even more. I love Steve's October Women poem that he does. And winter nights in the Poconos is a magical place, but I think doing a Diesel bloat any place is magical. So I've been doing Diesel bloats at Odenthal for the last 2 years, and they've been different each time. I have different elements that I put into it. But in this last time we sang and we took runes and things like that. But and I felt it was very powerful. I know that as I called on the mothers and had everybody, of course, think on their mother who was going to be joining us.
Describe in a little more detail some of the things that you did ritually to set the mood, because everybody I've talked to agrees that was an extremely powerful ritual.
Well, again,
so
yeah.
Tell us a little more about how you set the stage and some of the cool things you did.
Wow.
I thought those are important.
Well,
details.
It was, and we actually back at which had been a week or two before at Winter Nights in the Poconos with Katie Erickson, who pretty much led that bloat, and I assisted. We had the 3 Norns, and we were wearing veils, and that is what I did in my ritual too. I wore a veil, and it did kind of transform the setting, and apparently my energy, so that when people, I believe they took the rune from me, really sent something very, very powerful.
And did you have them say who it was what mother, quotes mother, they wanted to get in touch with?
Right.
Okay.
Well, we typically do that.
Right.
Have everybody say who they're
But
calling.
it's relevant
And
for some people.
one year I went around and gave blessings to everybody, And as I did, some of the words just kind of flowed from me, what I was saying. And I was giving, just sharing what was basically in my mind, just kind of flowed from me. But afterwards, I had one gentleman come up to me, a friend, and said, you know, you spoke as she would speak. You said her words, and now I know which path I have to take. I mean, he was really debating something in his life, and he felt that I was his mother come back and give him some advice. And I had this year, I had a friend of ours who, when he said the veil was there and I was behind the veil and I spoke to him, that all of a sudden he had this sense of his mother as he'd never had before, because they'd been estranged his whole life. And that next day he started looking into his genealogy of all things. And of course, that's something I have a passion for. And so we helped him find his roots, get back to his mother's side of the family. And it worked so well for him that he made a trip out there, spent a week in Georgia. And in August, he's moving out there to be with family up in that hill country in North Georgia. And he feels it was all because of the deserved load. So just know that these things can be very profound. Maybe not for everybody every time, but sometime it may be the message you need in your life and can really set you on a new course. And that's what we see.
And if I would like to interject. I talked with at least one other person who had, I believe, profound experiences as a result of that blow.
Okay.
There's something about the veil that lends anonymity, and it wasn't Sheila anymore. It was a Norm. And I felt that connection very strongly with my grandmother, whom I was trying to reach. And other people, person after person told me of, experiences that came to them as a result of that ritual, either during it or after it or so forth. So very, very powerful stuff.
Yeah. So why am I doing this? What's my reason for being in the Go There program? And for me, I've always been a Fricka's woman. I mean, I've realized that, and my place is to help nurture the folk in whatever way I can. But I'm also the folk builder at large for the AFA, and it's part of that same role where I want to be there to welcome people, to offer assistance, to give support, to help give meaning, to guide them through a tough time. And that's kind of always been my role, actually, from the beginning. That's why a lot of people have never really heard much from me. In the old days, you would get a handwritten message from me if you joined the AFA, and little notes. I still like writing personal messages to people, but Steve has always been the one who is the forefront, but I've always been there with him, and have always, in the old days, before we stepped down from leadership and left it to Matt and Mandy and others who are doing a fantastic job. But it was all the work kind of landed, most of it was in my lap. And it was frustrating at times. And I can't say that I handled it as well as I should. But I did love the connection with our members. And it was never ending, because I have a hard time letting go and letting other people help me. And I kind of suffered for that and learned a lot from it. But right now, because we stepped away and I retired from teaching, so I can now say that AFA is pretty much my full-time job, which I love doing. And it is my life's work.
And she's not kidding when she says full-time job. She's over there doing, well, okay, 6 to 8 hours a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I love it. That's what I do.
No, I mean, you do. You do incredible stuff.
Yeah.
So actually, since we're kind of on that theme, why don't you mention your genealogy?
Oh, okay.
and how that ties in.
So just today, I had to rush home because I went out to a nearby creek called Wolf Creek to meet with one of our AFA members and his little son, who were out there gold panning. And I told them I'd come out and see them as so they were digging around the rocks, and they were having a good old time out there. About 10 miles from here. I had a nice time, and he said, hey, be sure and give a plug for the genealogy group, because he is Mr. Genealogy. It's Steve Engel, for those of you who have been in touch with him. And he put together our AFA genealogy group, and the two of us have been working together for several years, sometimes doing presentations at AFA events. And what is really amazing is that we have encouraged people who have done their DNA to then take it a couple steps further, get a GEDmatch kit through gedmatch.com, and then send the GEDmatch kit number to him. And he is able, with some special genealogy tools, to build a spreadsheet that compares DNA amongst our members. And I wish I had a picture of it. Oh my gosh, if you could see it. The first 25 people, and Steve Mcnallen is related to 14 of them. And which I can see because he has a lot of Southern relatives, but and whereas I only had 5, but everybody had some. Everybody had some members. Now, when you get your regular genealogy comparisons, your cousin matches through Ancestry or 23andMe, those matches that I just mentioned will not come up because we can adjust them down to a lower, what are called centimorgans. So instead of being 7 centimorgans, we drop down to 5. At 5, we start seeing commonalities in our chromosomes. And it's been very exciting. We've only been doing it for about 10 days, but we have like 45 people now. And so when we say, oh, thou should focus assembly is about bringing together kin, which is what we've always said, literally, we are cousins. I mean, we're not just hunter-gatherers or, based on the Euro tribes, like we used to say, where that is our common thread. No, we're probably back 7, 8 generations, but we are connected, and there's a lot more to come. So it's pretty amazing to see that, and it's been so much fun for especially those of us who are very much into genealogy. And my thing has always been helping people build their family trees. I'm known for that, and I spend a lot of time doing it. And it's again, one of my great loves is helping people connect to their ancestors. So another reason why you should join the AFA genealogy. Nobody else does it like us.
There it is.
Uh-huh.
When we say we're kin, we really mean it.
Yeah, we can prove it.
Yeah. Well, we took notes about other things that we might run by people.
Yes.
We could talk about the way that gatherings have changed over the years.
Sure.
Or we could talk about Ken and McMahon.
Yes, I want to do that too.
Okay.
I would just want to say that probably to talk a little bit about our gatherings, which, as I said, started in people's homes, and then in the 2000s, we realized we wanted to do something a little bit more extravagant, but spend a whole weekend together and not just do it in a camping situation. So we started renting camps. And a couple of times we did Mendocino Woodlands, which was a beautiful CCC camp built in the 1930s with little stone cottages or with stone fireplaces, little wood cottages. And we would bring in music, and we had dancing and Celtic music and fine meals, and just decorated it, and it just felt so good. So we continued with that, and we, especially around winter nights, is when we were holding most of our big events.
It was actually one of those that we unveiled the AFA banner.
True, yes, it was. Yeah, Mendocino Woodlands, probably around 2006, and then we discovered Camp Norga, which was a Sons of Norway camp up in the Sierras, not too far from here. And we happened to meet a fine gentleman who was running it at the time, and he will always be a fine gentleman and a good friend. And he made it very easy for us to bring groups there, and it was more affordable. We did our own meals. We had the privacy of our own camp in a beautiful setting with a pool and everything. And we did that for several years, and that became our midsummer. And then we kind of lost the use of that particular facility, and we went off and found a couple of other places. One Sonoma County we did twice, and Napa County in California we did once. And following midsummer 2015, we had heard about a piece of property, and we never really seriously talked very much about Hoffs. even though we'd always had a Hoff and Land fund. But we thought, we're almost to the point, come on, we just spent $11,000 for this weekend to bring everybody in. And yeah, we kind of covered our costs, but wouldn't it be nice to have our own place and not worry about being rejected by the managers of a facility? And we found out about this place that was a Grange Hall, and it was for sale, and the price was amazing, and it wasn't too far from us. And it was literally the day after Midsummer, after our 20th anniversary of the AFA, which we celebrated big time that weekend. We went out and we found the Grange Hall.
And it was actually sort of a could well not have happened kind of deal.
Right.
Because Thorgan, who went out and was working with the real estate agents and so forth, kind of told her what we needed, and she took him to one place that was just totally inappropriate because it was on a hill like this, and it was almost more like a bunker or something, and just not really what we had in mind.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Breaking Bad, and then there was another one or two, and they just weren't appropriate at all. And so finally, she said to him, "Exactly what do you want to do with this?" And he told her. She said, "I think I know a place that might work." Bam.
Bam. And we went. We went literally as we drove away from Midsummer that year. We went to the Hoff, as we all know it now, Odin's Hoff. And we saw it and we debated, and I took pictures, and I produced a video, which you can still find. And it was pretty amazing. It was the right size. It had land with it. It was in a very rural area, very picturesque, and driving distance from Sacramento and our home, and the price was right. And it was like, I think the gods want us to have this. And we started pursuing it, and it meant doing some fundraising, Indiegogo. And in, I don't know how, 4 weeks, we'd raised, I think, $47,000. And Steve and I went in, and we were able to get the mortgage for the balance that we put a nice down on it, but we still owed a lot of money. And we filled out the paperwork, and we got it. We got the mortgage. And as of December 31st, 2018.
What year is it? More.
2018. Steve and I went in and we paid off the Hoff so that it was owned by the Austria-Folk Assembly, not by anybody else, not by a government agency, not by a bank, not by the Icelandic government or people who've been getting lots of money from their local government. No, this was done by us, for us. And so far as we know, it's the only Hoff in the whole world that can say that. And of course, it's not going to be the last, because we have every intention in the Austria-Folk Assembly to keep creating Hoffs because they're needed for our people as a gathering place. So utterly successful, was a wonderful thing for us to achieve for the Austria-Folk Assembly. It was really a highlight of what we did. And and it's beautiful. And if you haven't been out to see Odin's Hoff, you need to see it. It is gorgeous beyond belief. And it's so customized now from what it was. It was always a nice building, but it is just a beautiful Alsatrue temple at this point. Kennewick Man. I'm going to touch on Kennewick Man.
We've got a little more than 15 minutes.
Yeah, we can do that.
We'll have to stop pretty promptly at the top of the hour,
Yes.
so that, because Matt's thing on Facebook is kicking off right then, and we don't want to.
We want everybody to switch from this over to Matt Flavel over on Facebook, who's doing his chat, his Alsatrue-Folk Assembly chat that he does.
Can only AFA members
I don't know.
access that?
I don't know. I think it might be available afterwards. But if you're AFA, definitely go listen to him.
Yeah.
It was very entertaining, and he takes all sorts of questions. And we wish we could take questions here from you guys, but we didn't get questions in advance, and there's no way for us to see what your feed is, your chat, whatever it is. And so anyway, sometimes send us questions if you'd like us to ever address anything in particular. But one thing What was that?
He's
Oh, okay.
all right. Got any out there?
Oh,
Roger that.
okay. Right now, I'm just going to kind of hit one of the highlights we had, and it started right after we established the Austrian Folk Assembly, was Kennewick Man. Who the heck is Kennewick Man? Well, Kennewick Man was a skeleton that was found on the banks of the Columbia River in 1996. And it seemed to be an intact skeleton, and it looked so recent. I mean, obviously it was just bones, but it was collected and was sent to a coroner to check him out. And he had just about every bone there, and he laid it out, and he's looking at it and the size of the bones, and looks at the face and the shape of the head, and he says, "Whoa, this sure looks like a pioneer." And probably from the 19th century, maybe mid 1800s. And then he's looking carefully, and in the hip, he's with a microscope or with probably a hand lens, X-ray. He sees what is a spear point, and he looks at the spear point and he says, "That is old." I'm not sure if it was like a Clovis point, but it was something that looked very old. And at that point, he says, "Oh, this doesn't seem right. A pioneer would not have that." He has the bones carbon dated, and he comes back 9,300 years old. So how did that happen? How did you get a man who looks like us, like he's from Europe?
40 some odd points of reference on the skull alone said Caucasoid.
Yeah. And that's what everybody was saying. We were so we kind of got involved because it was in the hands of the Army Corps of Engineers because of the Columbia River and all their control of the water on there through Indian lands. And so they have a very close connection with the native tribes up there. The native tribes got together and they decided they wanted these bones ASAP. And the Army Corps of Engineers said, "Fine, we'll get you those bones." At the same time, I think it was 7 scientists, something like that, got together and they filed a suit to prevent the reburying of the bones until more was known about this man, whoever he was. And at that point, the Austrian Folk Assembly stepped in and we said, "Hey, we want to find out who he is too. Is there a chance that he had ancestry that took him back to Europe 9,300 years ago?"
Our position simply was that we needed to determine who this guy really was. If he wasn't one of us, fine, but if there's any chance that he was from Europe, we felt that that would make him more connected with us than to any of the local tribes. And that if he was going to be buried by anybody's rituals, it shouldn't be that of the American Indians in the area.
Right.
It should be us, frankly. We never made some of the statements that we are alleged to have made. We never said we thought he was a Viking. We never made any of those kind of claims. We simply wanted to know. And if he was more closely related to us, then we felt that we should have the disposition. It was that simple. We were never engaging in some of the outrageous beliefs that people.
I was never really antagonistic about the Indians. And
really wasn't,
No.
I mean, they should be able to bury their dead. I absolutely agree with that. And if it turned out he was closely related to them, fine. We're done with it. Yeah. Go in peace.
Yeah.
We do have a couple questions from the chat. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
I was coming your way.
Okay. What are your thoughts on reincarnation?
Oh.
I think that, rebirth is a fact. The situation isn't as simple as it is in kind of the New Age, or kind of reincarnation. It is not necessarily the actual reincarnation of the complete individual. It can be different soul components, the person's hamina, the person's might and main. These sorts of things can get reborn. Rebirth happens in the family line. There's just no evidence of it happening anywhere else. Edred Thorson, who is kind of my go-to guy because I think he knows more about this than most of us put together, frankly. His take on it is that most people on death go to hell with one L. Most people don't differentiate themselves enough to be reborn. He feels that that is something that has to be earned. There has to be a certain level of attainment, of individuation that has occurred. Now, is that the way it is? I can't speak for sure to that. I mean, emotionally, I think, oh, is that right? But on the other hand, whatever it is. And so I have to consider that. The goal for most people would be rebirth here among the folk, among their descendants, basically. And I think that is something that is very common. I think that that does happen. And then you've got a very few who will go to Valhalla, not necessarily because they die in combat, but because they have evolved to a certain level. I think that is more the deciding factor than literally death in combat. That's sort of the quick answer on that. Like I say, I think there's something to it. Exactly what that is, I haven't defined down yet. I absolutely do feel that at the very least, there are parts of our ancestors inside us, and they speak to us and they whisper to us. I think that death is basically a flimsy curtain. It's not a brick wall. And I think most of us have had some sort of contact with those ancestors. So it may be that Dr. Thorson's interpretation is a little harsh.
I would like to just say,
find out when I get there,
that I do believe in genetic memory. And so, because we're getting those genes from our ancestors, I think we have experiences. We will go places. We will go to our homelands over in Europe or maybe some other place and just know that feels comfortable. It feels like I've been there before. And I think most people probably had that happen a time or two. Easily to most people. It certainly doesn't happen easily to me, but I have had really significant experiences like that. So I think that we can connect with our ancestors and that they continue to work through us. Can I say where I get that? No, but I do know I'm carrying their genes, and we all are. So maybe that's where some of this the rebirth comes from. Maybe our parents.
But you probably were not a Chinese princess in a previous lifetime.
Okay, do you have another question?
I got another one. It's do you guys mind if I answer? Somebody's asking me.
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
Fire it up.
Very cool. Ziggy Wolf says, Dave Martell, what are your thoughts on interpretations of some lore pointing to reincarnation? This guy's very curious about reincarnation, and rightly so, because it's a really fascinating and really important thing to dig into and hash out, and for us to decode and understand, because what happens after you die, the eschatology of the religion is pretty important. What happens after you die? We should at least have an idea of what goes on. So that's the way that I look at it. But I'm not a lore master, so I'm not the kind of guy that can just recite things off the top of my head and tell you exactly where to go. However, I do know that there's a little bit of a debate about exactly what goes on with the system of reincarnation. Now, within the Eddas, if you accept the Eddas as the hierology, then within the Eddas, it does talk about having a soul, and then your soul going on and having an afterlife. We have the idea of going through, as Mr. Mcnallen mentioned, going to Helheim, going to hell, and then you entering into the halls of Volkfang and like all of this stuff. But the debate between reincarnation is whether I don't know if this is the correct terminology or not, but the debate is between whether it's immediate reincarnation as produced and shown in the studies of parapsychology, or because there's some mentions of that, but there's also mentions of what I would call cataclysmic reincarnation, that after the cycle ends, after Ragnarok, then our souls are brought back to be reborn, and we can repopulate the earth again. Which one is absolutely certain and true? I'm not gonna I'm not sure yet. Hopefully, we can decode and figure that out eventually. But that's the debate that goes on right now, according to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think anybody has any totally firm answers on that. Certainly in the saga evidence, people are likely, the evidence is, that the people are reborn, or that parts of them are reborn, some soul components of the whole deal, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Are reborn fairly soon after. I mean, in sons and daughters or grandsons, and sometimes it skips a generation or two. And they do all sorts of things to find out, read runes, I suppose, to find out, just who this person was and their previous presence among us.
Yeah, certainly a very
But I do
fascinating
see it
topic.
as a continual stream. I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said it's certainly a very fascinating topic.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more questions?
Yes, sir. There was one. Let me find it. I lost them. My buddy Siege says, does Also True have people in every state? I'm not sure if he's asking whether there's practitioners of Also True in every state, or if he's asking if there's AFA in every state. Perhaps
That's
you
different.
folks could answer both questions.
You're
Gosh,
the folk builder.
I think we are in every state now. We weren't always. There were a few states that we're missing, but I know we're in every state, even Hawaii at this point. So that's very gratifying, because it took a long time to get here.
Yeah.
As for heathens, yeah, I'm sure, because we know there are a lot of people who feel that joining an online group suffices for practicing the religion fully. And those people are going to be found all over too. Some will believe like we do, and a lot will be inclusive and universalist and beliefs, of which we have not much in common with them, because our ancestors are too key to the way we see our religion. Our worldview is ancestrally based. And when you're with some universalists, you will hear them hail the gods, but you'll never hear them say hail the ancestors in the way we do. And those go together. So yes, there are members all over the country and in many countries of the world at this point.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely has taken off.
Yeah.
Maybe time for one more question, if you got one out there.
I did not see one. However, Mandy Kins in the chat says, fantastic job, Sheila. You're a natural.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
she is.
Sweet. Well, it's like it's been bottled up in me for 25 years, right? This is my chance to spill my guts.
There's an expression that was common some decades back, particularly, and Elsa Christensen, who founded, the Odinist outfit, Odinist Fellowship, has been commonly known as the Folk Mother, and of course she's been deceased for a number of years, and I just kind of feel that if anybody's an heir, that it would be Sheila, because she is, as you can see, this is motherhood personified. I mean, it's all about caring about other people and nurturing and all of those sorts of things. So I don't know. I think of her as the folk mother. I mean, people will, I don't know what other people think, but I don't care what other people think.
And of course, Frigga is my model, so it's a big order to try to achieve. God has said, not that I ever will, but that is what I'm striving for. And being like our mother, all Mother Frigga, is who I ask for guidance from. And
all right.
I think she's listening very well so far.
We have one more question in the chat, and then I have a question of my own for you. But
all right.
Hubert, he says he's tagging me. I'm not sure if he's asking me or if he just wants me to ask you guys, but I'm going to ask you guys since it's your show. Says, Dave Martell, what is Also True view on the soul?
I lost a couple of words in there.
What is the Also True view of the soul?
Okay, just generally speaking.
Generally speaking.
Okay. The best evidence, the best scholarship, because you got to go with the scholarship, really. The best scholarship is that we have a number of different soul components, We have the ek, or the ego. That's that I that's in there, and then we have the different faculties that give you connection with the other worlds and so forth. You have the logical mind, and you have the more intuitive, less logical, more mystically inclined part of our being. I mean, there's a number of different ways of looking at it, but it's not simple, really. I think that the general idea is that attaining wisdom really means working with all of these different soul components and elevating them to the highest level you can, and ideally under the inspired Odinic consciousness, the Odinic ecstasy, to be able to merge those into in all of them. That's not a simple answer, I know, but it's not a simple question.
But it's so different than Christian soul.
Yeah,
single soul.
It's
We
not
don't
as
have
simple
that.
as not as simple
Which
as
is
Christian.
exciting because people can look into it.
Yeah.
So
find out more.
you're saying that it's almost similar to the tripartite soul.
Tell me more.
Who was it? It was I believe it was Plato that wrote about the tripartite soul. How it had three components. Had like your ego. I can't remember. I can't quote this stuff. But essentially, what he was talking about is sort of how your soul had several different components. You had like your ego. You had your inner soul, and it's very similar to our whole thing of how man is made of three parts. You have like Odin, Vili, and Ve, and you have the breath and the mind, and then the flesh, and it's that. I guess it's that kind of thing. Would you say that it's similar to that?
That's very interesting because I didn't know that about Platonic philosophy, and I think it's interesting because you have to wonder if it doesn't spring from some sort of a common Indo-European root or something. But I would say yes. Generally speaking, I do think that's a good comparison.
So you would say that we have three parts. You would say that we have our flesh, and then we have our consciousness, and also a soul essence or energy. Because that's my personal gnosis.
Yeah, I think we have at least that. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I'd refer you to Thorson for like a detailed breakdown on all of those and what they do. You can find it in almost any of his books.
Nine Doors of Midgard.
Nine Doors of Midgard certainly has it. The Troth, his book, may have it, and some of the others. Yeah. It's pretty well out there in his material.
Yeah, and I know he's not really an also true source, but I really like Julius Evola's take on it in Doctrine of Awakening. He had a really good description of it.
I haven't read Doctrine of Awakening.
Yeah, it's not really an easy read. It's kind of a tedious read, but there's a lot of really good information, and it's really good. Typical Julius Evola style, very stylistic and whimsical, but there's some kind of goofy gnosis in there, but there's also a lot of really profound truths. So I really urge people to check it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then I have one more question of my own before we you guys hand it back over. Ms. Sheila, what do you think about men being practicers or worshipers of the All Mother themselves? Because that's my matron deity.
Wow, that's interesting. That's unusual. A lot of men are drawn to Freya, and very seriously. I mean, they truly honor and revere her. I have no problem. I think I know many women who are followers of Odin first. So I think if one has a connection to a god or a goddess, go with it and develop that, and not reduce the other ones to be insignificant in your practices, but to involve as many as you can. But yeah, focusing on Frigga, I think, is wonderful for all of us, because she is guardian of the home, and we all need that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah,
go for it.
The reason that I number one, I had some really profound spiritual experiences with the All Mother, but also a lot of my ancestors that inhabited the Alpine regions and northern Italy, the Lombards, and a lot of these guys. their matron deity was Frau Holla or Frigg, and they were
Yes.
they were very much warriors. They weren't they were very masculine people, and being from
She gave the
Pennsylvania.
Langobards their name.
Right.
I'm sorry.
She gave the Langobards their name. There's a story about that.
Yeah.
The Longbeards.
The Longbeards.
Yeah.
Yeah, the long
Yeah,
beard.
good.
That's right. That's right. That's very
Yes.
very cool. Yeah. So being from Pennsylvania, that's also in Pennsylvania Dutch heathenry. Frau Holla is the mother of the mountain. She's the mother of Pennsylvania. So that's kind of been where I went with it and everything. But we are. I'm filibustering on your guys' show. I apologize.
That's okay. No, that's great
All right, you're
information.
doing fine,
I
man.
love it. That's good.
So
Loved it. Yeah.
I'll hand it
We're
off to you
still-
guys and let you guys conclude your show here.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say real quick,
No,
baby?
yeah, we were bringing up Kennewick Man. Go watch a video on YouTube called Homicide in Kennewick. It will tell our side of the story. It's a fascinating video. It'll be fun to show at a kindred meeting.
We decided to do a program on him. We'll do a show on Kennewick
Yeah, we
Man
will.
sometime.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's such a saga.
And it's relevant. It's
It is a
relevant. It's
modern
relevant
saga.
to this thing of ours.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
So we need to close because people
Okay.
need to go on and hear.
All right.
Matt.
All right. That's all for tonight, folks. Keep your powder dry. Keep your cupboard full. Keep your spouse happy. Keep your children close. And keep your data out of the hands of the deep state.
Ooh.
And learn to pause to love life in Midgard, because it is a wondrous gift indeed.
Yep.
Hail and
Mhm.
good night.
Good night. Thanks for watching.